mission about 60 miles above the surface of the moon and did an outbound powered flyby. Now, that powered flyby means that we're taking advantage of the speed we already have, the gravity of the moon, and the energy we get from the service module's engines in order to target our orbit. And the orbit that we were targeting is called a DRO, or a distant retrograde orbit. And what that means is that instead of moving counterclockwise relative to the Earth like the moon does naturally, we are moving clockwise. So we're going in this opposite direction. That's what retrograde means. And distant means that we are going farther away than we have with any human spacecraft before. We're orbiting about 38,000 miles above the surface of the moon. And this is a really convenient orbit because we're able to stay there without having to use a ton of fuel for station keeping. And it also provides a safe, efficient path back home when we're ready. So this allowed us to learn how to operate in deep space, one of the core tenets of this mission. And then once we were ready, we started our trip back home. So we performed one more powered flyby, this time targeting our return, where we lit up those engines as we dipped close to the surface of the moon. And then we began our return transit, which took about 7 days, and that leads us to today. So next time, we'll talk a bit more about what that return looks like and what our entry is actually going to look like. But until then, back to you.
Thank you, Philip. And again, a live view of Orion closing in on planet Earth, now about 11,000 miles away from Earth, as it continues a very, very precise trajectory for a splashdown that is scheduled at 11:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Central Time this morning. For Orion, launch from the Kennedy Space Center occurred on November 16th on the world's most powerful rocket, the Space Launch System. The first outbound powered flyby of the moon was performed 5 days later on November 21st, dipping to within about 81 miles of the lunar surface. That placed Orion on a very precise trajectory for its ultimate goal, that racetrack trajectory called the distant retrograde orbit, that would allow Orion the time and the space environment needed to test its mettle. 4 days later, Orion executed an engine firing to enter into that orbit, and the next day, Orion surpassed the record set during Apollo 13 52 years ago for the greatest distance ever traveled by a human-rated spacecraft designed to return humans to the Earth. On November 28th, Orion reached its farthest distance from the Earth, some 268,000 miles, before departing the distant retrograde orbit on December 1st. And this past Monday, Orion conducted a 3-minute, 27-second engine firing behind the moon to whip around Earth's closest neighbor for the final leg of its flight, passing to within 80 miles of the surface, turning for home, and its splashdown that is scheduled just 1 hour, 21 minutes, 44 seconds from now. The initial mission of the Artemis 1 program was always designed to be a test flight, wringing out all of the systems of the Space Launch System and the Orion spacecraft, and for more than 25 days it did just that, setting the stage for a crew to board an Orion vehicle for a trip around the moon in 2 years. So with that, out in the Pacific, where Orion will be splashing down not long from now, we're going to go back here in a moment to Daryl Nail, who's standing by with one of the first persons that will actually be in the water to execute the recovery and the securing of the Orion spacecraft. Daryl?
That's right, Rob, and his name is Wayne Shearer, and he is the Navy diver first class aboard boat number 2. He is the lead on one of the 2 small boats called Cricks, which are essentially small inflatable Navy boats. He's just about 20 or so minutes away from getting into that boat. Thank you, Wayne, for coming up here and making some time for us to tell us about the operation today.
Of course, sir.
So tell me exactly how your team goes about securing this spacecraft after it comes back from space, splashes down the water just a few miles from us.
Well, sequence of events are going to go splash down, wait 2 hours. We're going to do a hazard analysis, make sure there's no gas coming off of it. We're going to come up, take those pictures like you said earlier for those engineering purposes. Once that's done, then we put the what's called a pony collar on it, and then basically it's a sequence of events of pulling all those ropes out like you said earlier and pulling it into the well deck. Easy day.
Easy day, and we know that there's certainly going to be some challenges, right? Seas are 4 to 5 foot currently, which is within your limit. Let's take a look now underneath the well deck to the boats that are currently being prepared. You're really literally going to be going down here and right to that boat after we conclude our interview. How will you manage the 4 to 5 foot seas with a bobbing spacecraft and bobbing inflatable boat with your team?
Well, it's just another day in the park for us. You know, we've trained for the last year and a half for this. We've been in worse seas than this, recovering anything under the water. It's just different. Instead of recovering something from under the water, we're going to recover something that fell from the sky.
You can see on our screen, those are the tip edges of your 2 inflatable boats. I imagine you'll be positioned somewhere towards the front or back?
I'm positioned toward the middle of the boat.
Towards the middle of the boat. And as you do this operation, have you thought about just the importance of it? Reflecting that it is you who will be one of the first people to put your hands on a spacecraft that just came back from space.
I mean, definitely, this is probably every kid's little dream, or every little kid's dream, to be able to do exactly what I'm doing today, you know, and I think I can speak for the whole dive team that we're honored to be part of history and to be part of something so monumentous, and just ready and excited to go out and do this.
On a personal note, you and I were talking about how you got into the Navy and the dive team. What was it that motivated you to become a Navy diver, and then ultimately, now that you're on this operation, looking back at that choice?
Well, February 2003 from Leesville, Louisiana, and I heard a loud boom outside my window one morning, and I ran outside and talked to my dad, and a few hours later we're watching the news, and unfortunately what we heard was the USS Columbia break up. So, you know, it was not a great thing to hear, but it kind of jump-started my career of like, hey, what do I want to do? And I wanted to be out there to help people, and the Navy just kind of fell into my lap, and, you know, 20 years later to be able to be part of history of the next thing we've flown into space like that is absolutely a dream come true for myself.
Certainly a tragedy for NASA, one that has created many lessons learned for our agency, but interesting that it led you into this.
They have around the world.
And briefly, Wayne, as you look out here to the Pacific Ocean, where you will literally be in the water in just a few minutes, will you be sharing any words with your team?
Good luck, be safe, and let's be part of history.
All right, we wish you the best. Wayne, thank you for taking the time, and good luck out there.
Thanks, sir.
Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Daryl. It looks like a great day out in the Pacific, west of Baja, California, where Orion is headed. And you can't beat this view, though. The view of the Earth, where Orion is headed, tried and true, on a pinpoint course for a splashdown just 1 hour and 16 minutes from now. After Orion enters the Earth's atmosphere at the conclusion of this 25-and-a-half-day mission, the spacecraft is going to rely on a very heavily tested parachute system to slow down its speed and allow for a very gentle splashdown. Koki Machin, the chief engineer of Orion's parachute assembly system, now describes the process and the path to the certification of the parachute system. A series of 11 parachutes will be deployed in sequential fashion, a very dramatic return to Earth lying ahead for the Orion spacecraft.
Our design is almost exactly the Apollo design. The shape of the mains, the shape of the drogues. The only major difference is we are bigger. Apollo weighed roughly 13,500 pounds, and we weigh 22 and change thousand pounds. And so our parachutes are larger because we have more energy to take out of the system, and our parachutes are stronger. So at a fundamental level, all-round parachutes are alike. The Orion system has drogue parachutes that initially decelerate the system, and because they're deployed at a much higher velocity, they're made of ribbons. The ribbons can take the fluttering associated with high-velocity deployments much better than a solid canopy can. And once the system slows down, it deploys the mains. The mains are much closer to a personnel chute. They're called ring sails. The major difference would be that a personnel chute could be 28 to 30 feet in diameter, and a CPAS main is 116 feet in diameter. So the Orion parachutes are what we refer to as hybrid parachutes. The drag surfaces are nylon, but then the structural grid, how we take the drag on that nylon surface and transmit it down to the vehicle, is made of Kevlar. And Kevlar is quite a bit stronger and stiffer, and it just completely different material than the drag surfaces are. So the CPAS system is designed to safely recover the crew with just 2 mains deployed. The problem with deploying the backup chute after you deploy the first 2 chutes is you have to negotiate the chute that's already out there. So what we chose to do, and what Apollo chose to do, was to deploy the backup chute with the main system itself. And as a result, we get a much softer landing when all the parachutes work properly. But both systems were designed to land with just 2 main parachutes functioning. When we did the pad abort test at White Sands, I was quite scared. But I wasn't scared for our system. I was scared for the repositioning after the rockets took off the capsule and repositioned it. It was perfect. That thing reoriented like it was on rails. And I swear to you, this huge relief came over me when the cover came off, because I thought, wow, we're not done, but we're done. I know this system's going to work.
And there again, the view of the Earth. We're about 33 minutes away from the first big milestone. That will be the separation of the crew module and the service module, signaling the beginning of Orion's entrance into the home stretch of its 1.4 million mile journey. With us at this hour is the Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems, Kathy Kerner. Kathy, thanks for joining us this morning. It's great to see you.
Glad to be here.
You know, this is a little bit of deja vu for you. You were a flight director in this room for a number of years. Your thoughts as Orion approaches the end of this maiden flight?
Yeah, certainly a lot of history in human spaceflight has been made in this room, and we're making some more today. I'm really excited. There's a lot of energy in the room, and it's very familiar, but it's also very different as we step into this next episode in human exploration.
You know, the mission had its trials and tribulations getting off the ground, but once it did, so far, so good. The mission has exceeded expectations in many areas. Of course, the post-flight analysis is yet to come, but from the top level, the 1,000-foot level, looking down at the mission, what are your thoughts about what has been accomplished in setting the stage for a crewed mission 2 years from now?
Absolutely, this has been a phenomenal mission thus far. If you asked me to grade it, I'd give us an A+. I think that the work that has been performed both by the Exploration Ground Systems team, the SLS team, and the Orion team has been fantastic. We've been learning how the spacecraft operates. We've been learning how to fly this amazing machine, and it's gone so well that we've actually been able to add tests during the mission that help expand the envelope that we're going to be able to use to operate the spacecraft once we have crew on board.
The major objective of the mission lies ahead. That's the rigorous testing of the heat shield, as we've just seen in our features. 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit building up around the spacecraft, twice as much as space shuttles endured when they re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. How do you think it's all going to fare, and what then needs to be done to analyze the performance of the heat shield in certifying that we are good to put a crew on board in a couple of years?
So this test, this is the primary objective of this test mission, but we've got a lot more objectives that we need to accomplish between now and when we launch crew. We have an environmental test that we need to conduct of the entire integrated spacecraft once we get the environmental and life support systems on board. So this is just one of many tests that we have going forward and one of many analyses that we need to do with all of the post-flight data that we retrieve from the spacecraft.
We opened up the broadcast paying homage to Apollo 17 landing on the moon 50 years ago today. It's only coincidence that this happened, but it seems very appropriate, doesn't it?
It does. It seems fitting that we would honor Apollo with the new legacy of the Artemis generation in this mission today.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Kathy Kerner, the Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems, and we're nearing the end of the home stretch here of this very first mission.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
And as the Earth grows larger and larger in the field of view, Orion continues its trek back home with crew module, service module separation just 30 minutes from now. Entry interface just 20 minutes after that. In the meantime, let's go back out to the Pacific, the destination for Orion today, where Darrell Nail from the Kennedy Space Center, again embedded with the exploration ground systems and recovery teams, is standing by with Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut.
Well operations. All hands on involved, staying clear of wing walls, vehicle storage areas.
That's right, Rob. Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut, has been on board since we departed on Wednesday to come out to the site. Thank you for being here to take some time to talk to us amidst this important update. It will be brought back. I imagine that the astronauts will be very interested in the data that comes off of it. This particular capsule has sensors all over it, more than any future capsule will have.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to tell us what we need to do, change, modify for the next Artemis mission.
All flight quarter stations. The ship expects to read man flight quarters at 0945.
And what you're hearing are some announcements from the ship PA informing the crew at what stage in the operation we're at. I should mention that we just had helicopters, the MH-60s at the back of the flight deck just launched off and are in flight now to the recovery area. They play an important role here. Shannon, continuing now with our interview, when you look at the operation as a whole, they're currently trying to determine how the astronauts will be recovered. That's not happening today.
That's right.
But that will have to be integrated into the operation. Do they come off immediately after the crew splashes down? Or there's an idea kicking around there to have them stay in the capsule and come to the back of the ship. What are your thoughts on both of those? What are the pluses and minuses on those?
Well, certainly the plus of having the crew come off immediately is that the crew is not staying in the capsule for an extended period of time. There'll be a time when we'll have to turn off the cooling in the capsule, which will mean the crew will start getting very warm in their suits. So it's better to get them off before that. Also, you'll probably see later the operations in the well deck. There are a lot of waves in there, and it's probably not going to be a fun ride for the crew to be in there. So you're right, we're looking at it. The actual, next summer, we're going to have another test run. We'll be out on a ship, and we will be looking at all the different methodologies for getting crew off the capsule.
And may I ask what your particular favorite would be? I mean, I think you've already kind of indicated you're leaning more towards let's get off the ship.
Get off immediately. Yeah, so I think we will probably, now don't quote me on this, but we'll probably extract the crew via helicopter from the capsule and helicopter them over to the ship.
And as an astronaut, just briefly, when you come back from space, physically, you're in a condition where, how would you describe it, physically and mentally?
Yeah, so when we come back, we consider crew deconditioned. While on the space station, for example, we have lots of exercise, so we're really strong when we come back. It is still a big adjustment to being in Earth's gravity again. The lunar missions, it's kind of in the middle between what we did in the shuttle days and what we're doing on the space station. So we don't know exactly how the crew's going to feel, but they're going to be exhausted, and so their balance may be off a little bit. So it's better just to get them out of the capsule. As far as the mental side goes, I found that when I am back on Earth, it's just a huge sigh of relief in that somebody else is worrying all the details, and I can just sit and relax a little bit.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for all the insight. You're doing a great job of staying balanced amidst the 4 to 5 foot seas as you see the horizon going up and down, right?
It is definitely a challenge.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Rob, we'll send it back to you in Houston.
Thanks, Darrell. Thank you, Shannon, and happy sailing out there as we continue to watch this scintillating view of the Earth as we are just 1 hour, 5 minutes away from splashdown. Now, as Shannon Walker alluded to in that interview with Darrell Nail on the USS Portland, we're going to be on the air here for a couple of hours after splashdown while a number of flight objectives and test objectives are being conducted, data gathering on the Orion spacecraft. But the whole recovery issue to get Orion into the well deck of the USS Portland is no small feat. Melissa Jones, who is the landing director and the recovery director from the Kennedy Space Center, has worked tirelessly to choreograph all of the elements of that recovery operation. Let's take a look now at how Orion will be recovered.
Today we are aboard the USS John P. Murtha, and behind me is a mock-up capsule of the Orion crew module, and we are training the team to be ready to do Artemis 1 recovery operations. My role as the NASA Recovery Director is to lead the interagency team that will recover the capsule. Ever since the Apollo program, NASA and the Navy have worked together to recover NASA's capsules in the water. So one of the huge benefits of working with the Navy is the fact that they're operational and we leverage their core competencies to bring the flight hardware and the crew back safely from the moon. On the Artemis 1 recovery day, my job will be to direct the team through the integrated operation to recover the capsule. The ship will get to the recovery location 24 hours before, and we will start launching weather balloons. And that data will go back to Houston and will help inform where we splash down. A couple hours before splashdown, the Navy launches small boats off of the knuckle boom crane, and helicopters will take off, and they will do their circles in the air, and they are waiting for the capsule to re-enter so that they can get good data and photo imagery of the capsule on its way back to Earth. Once that is done and we splash down, we will safe the capsule, approach the capsule, attach lines to the capsule, and recover it into the well deck of the ship. Artemis 1 recovery operations will take about 5 hours to perform all of the work we need to do because we are gathering data so that we can fly crewed mission on Artemis 2. When Artemis 1 splashes down, it's going to be the culmination of all of the hard work that we've put in as a team. It's going to be an amazing feeling, hearing that we've met Earth's interface and that we can see 3 good main parachutes. And when we hear splashdown, I'm going to get goosebumps all over me.
And again, that whole recovery operation will take several hours. We are going to remain on the air for at least 2 hours or so after splashdown so that we can bring you all the information regarding the initial safing of the vehicle and the test objectives that the flight control team here in Houston, led by Flight Director Judd Freeling, will be absorbing all of that data, mostly about the thermal conditions of the spacecraft, which will have come through some 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit in entry. And with us at this moment is the man who is going to be watching all of that very, very carefully, John Kowal, who's the Orion Thermal Protection System Manager. John, your big moment is lying ahead here. The plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere. This is the moment of truth to test the heat shield. What kind of thermal environment are you expecting for Orion as it makes its way into the Earth's atmosphere and then back through the atmosphere itself?
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, 5,000 degrees on the ship, but to back that up, how do we get there? So that vehicle still has all that energy that the launch rocket put into it during that first beautiful launch, right? So that gets converted into velocity. So we're going at 25,000 miles per hour, which is, how do you even fathom what that means? It's 7 miles per second. Wow. So all that energy, enough to power 4,000, 5,000 homes in a day, we have to get rid of it. And how do we do that? The vehicle comes slamming into the atmosphere, starts trying to push the air out of the way. That air is pushing back, the pressures go up, the temperatures go up. We're talking upwards of around 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the flow field. So that energy goes into the flow field, and then the flow field wants to give it back to the surface of the TPS. So that's what the TPS is going to see, or what the heat shield is going to see, and that's what pushes it up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
What kind of testing was required throughout the course of the preparations for Orion to prepare the vehicle for launch that made you confident that it could withstand the rigors of this sort of environment?
Yeah, there's been a lot of testing. I mean, we've been at this for since the end of the shuttle program, if you think back to that system, that was a reusable system, we had kind of been out of the business of these ablation materials for quite a while, since Apollo. So we had to train a whole new generation of engineers on developing that type of system, as well as getting the materials back. So there was a lot of testing in arc jets. That's the primary way that you test these types of materials. You can create these temperatures. It's like a wind tunnel with a lightning bolt going down the center of it, and that's how you create this high temperature plasma, and that gets impinged onto the test article. So we do a lot of materials testing. We've done quite a bit of testing of the system. You know, even though we're using the same material, the AV coat that they used in Apollo, it's in a different form. And so we made it into blocks. Those blocks have seams that have to be filled. Those seams are always one of the areas that you want to test the most, is because that's where the problems happen. And so we've done a lot of testing there in the thermal, and also structurally. We've had to do a lot of testing to see how the AVCOAT blocks interact with the structure underneath, and make sure that it's all going to hold up to those loads.
And John, it's about 11 minutes or so from the time of entry interface at an altitude of about 400,000 feet until we come out of that second blackout period. So that's going to be a very interesting time,
sort of a nail-biting time, if you will. But after the vehicle splashes down and is back at the Kennedy Space Center in a few weeks for
post-flight analysis, what are the sorts of things that you and your engineering team will be looking for to give it a passing grade in preparation for putting a crew on board a couple of years from now?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we look at. I break it into two different categories. The first is the flight data. We have instrumentation embedded in the heat shield at a number of locations. So we measure temperatures, we measure heat rates, we measure pressures, stresses. All that data will tell us how the material actually performed in that flight environment. It will also help us to inform our computer modeling methods, and that's another thing that we need to make sure that it's performing how we thought it was going to perform, so that we can use those models in the future, to predict for other missions. Now, the other thing we'll do is we'll be looking at the hardware itself. The instrumentation, you only get measurements where you put that instrument, of course, right? But looking at the heat shield, just looking at it, the big picture, you can see the streamlines. You can see how the flow was going across the heat shield. You can see where boundary layer transition may have occurred. So there's so much to just visually see. And then we'll be taking samples of the heat shield. We'll be taking that material out and looking at how much had ablated, looking at the char thickness, the density gradients as you go through as the material burned off, and comparing that to what our models have predicted. And again, that'll help us to be able to validate and correlate our models further.
Very good. It's going to be a very important time for the engineers, of course, and we'll see how Orion fares here in the next hour or so. John Cowell, Orion's Thermal Protection System Manager, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Now just 16.5 minutes away from the separation of the crew module from the European service module. That will begin a trip hammer series of events as Orion begins the process of entering the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface just 36 minutes away. So let's go back out to the Pacific Ocean west of Baja, where Daryl is on the USS Portland. Daryl?
That's right, Rob. Quick update for you on out here in the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Mexico. We have the small boats, the Navy small boats. All 6 boats are now in the water. They call them CRICs. These are Navy boats that are inflatable, highly maneuverable. These are the ones that will actually put hands on the spacecraft in order to secure it and eventually get it tied to lines that brings it to the back of the ship and into the well deck. I want to talk a little bit about this location here today. This location in the Pacific, we're just about 5 miles away from the splashdown area. This was actually the backup location. Initially, this was supposed to happen off the coast of San Diego, California, but the weather forecast for that area called for a cold front that has moved in today, bringing with it 12-foot high seas, and those seas would have been too high to perform this operation, too high for the small boats for recovery. So Recovery Director Melissa Jones and the mission management team made the decision to back up and go to the backup location 300 miles south of San Diego, and that's where we find ourselves today with excellent weather in order to do this operation. As you look off into the sky, we're awaiting the second to last weather balloon release that we will have for the day. This weather data critical to the operation that is happening today, especially when it comes to the landing point of the crew module in the ocean, as well as the debris that goes with it. And that debris happens during the separation of the forward bay cover, which covers the parachutes, and then of course the parachutes and their hardware themselves. All of it together, they take in the winds, and you can feel the winds are picking up a little bit. That wind data will give us refined information and data in order to calculate exactly the landing spot. Now, we're not alone out here in the Pacific Ocean. We do have friends helping us today, and I want to take a shot now of a ship off in the distance that has joined us for today's operation, and that is the USS Montgomery. That ship is just a few miles away. As you can see it there, the USS Montgomery is providing security today. It is what the Navy calls a littoral ship. It specializes in close-to-shore combat. It's highly maneuverable in that space. Today, though, it has a peaceful mission, and that is to provide security to this location during splashdown. So for the public safety, to prevent boats from coming in and around the area, as well as provide additional eyes to the sky in tracking Orion crew module as it comes down. You can see a little bit of a bounce there, and that's caused by the seas that we are currently experiencing, which are in the range of 4 to 5 feet. Those seas closely tracked by our NASA team with the wave management system. They are wave monitoring system rather. They are closely monitoring the seas for the moment where we bring the Orion capsule into the well deck. That is a highly choreographed and very dynamic operation. With the seas being what they are, when those waves come into the well deck, it can create a very dynamic environment with waves splashing back and forth inside the well deck, and teams on ropes trying to stabilize Orion to get it in just the right position here on the ship to then allow the well deck to drain out, have the Orion crew module put in place for its ride back to San Diego. That's the latest from here on the USS Portland out in the Pacific Ocean. Rob, will send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. We can report that all of Orion's systems are performing magnificently at this hour. At an altitude of just under 6,000 nautical miles, we did lock up on the tracking and data relay satellite system. So Orion's telemetry is now being processed through the TDRS network. This worked in concert with the Deep Space Network throughout the course of the mission. And now that we're on TDRS the rest of the way, we'll be able to have real-time data through our tracking and data relay satellite system constellation. We're just 11 and a half minutes away from crew module, service module separation, the first major milestone on the road home in this final phase of Orion's 25-and-a-half-day mission. So let's take a visual and interactive look at what is coming up for Orion's journey back to Earth. Let's go back to NASA's Philip Hargrove at the moon board.
Thank you. Welcome back to the moon board. So we're going to talk a bit about the European Service Module and the Orion Crew Module. So as we know, these two systems have been working in tandem for a really long time, and that extends beyond just this Artemis 1 test flight for the past 26 days. So back in 2019 was when they were first integrated and pieced together. In 2020 was when they were fully assembled, including the solar panels and the protective fairings that protected them during launch. And then they were finally attached to the launch abort system and made it on top of SLS in October of 2021, prior to, of course, launch on November 16th, just 26 days ago. So we know that one of the primary test objectives of this mission is to make sure that this heat shield at the bottom of the crew module is able to safely bring our astronauts home from deep space. Now, for reference, when we bring astronauts home from the International Space Station, they're coming in at about 17,000 miles per hour. But today, Orion is coming in at 25,000 miles per hour. So we're coming in way hotter, way faster than we have done before. So we need some new heat shield technology. And we also need some additional hardware in order to slow us down and make that really happen. So let's talk about what that looks like. So this forward segment of the Orion crew module is called the forward bay cover. And this section is actually designed to completely be pulled off by 3 parachutes. So we have 3 parachutes that's going to pull that off. We have 2 drogue parachutes that are going to come out after that to slow us down a bit. We have 3 pilot parachutes that are going to pull our mains out. And then the stars of the show are 3 main parachutes that measure up to 116 feet in diameter each. So that gives us 11 parachutes that it takes to get us safely back home. So now that we know a little bit about what that hardware looks like, we can take a look at what that journey actually looked like. So, as we know, we had a 7-day return transit, and as we approached the Earth, the service module and the crew module are separated from one another, and the service module is going to burn up in the atmosphere above the Pacific Ocean. As that happens, the Orion crew module is going to use its reaction control thrusters to do a 180 flip and point that heat shield towards the atmosphere as we target re-entry. So a really important phase here is entry interface. This is at an altitude of about 400,000 feet, and this is where we define a lot of our entry conditions, such as the flight path angle and the velocity. Now this is really important because if you come in at too shallow of an angle, you may bounce right off the atmosphere and not even re-enter. But if you come in too steeply, you're going to experience forces that are beyond the design of your spacecraft. So what we're going to do today is actually toe the line and do a nominal skip maneuver where we're actually going to bounce off once. That allows us to have a steeper re-entry, and that actually increases the heating, allowing us to really test the capability of that heat shield. And we will also be minimizing the G loading, which leads to a softer ride for the Moonican and in the future for our Artemis astronauts. Now, once we do that, the atmosphere is going to slow us down pretty significantly, but we'll still be going over 300 miles per hour. And then we will slow down to 20 miles per hour after that sequence of 11 parachute deployments. Now, once we splash down west of California, we will have these red inflatables that will make sure that no matter what orientation we hit the water at, we will be right side up. And then the USS Portland is going to recover the capsule and bring it back to the U.S. Naval Station in San Diego. Now, there's a really large team comprised of U.S. Navy, Air Force, NASA, contractors who worked really hard to prepare for today. So I am super excited to see them welcome Orion home. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. We are coming up on the critical stuff leading up to Orion's return to Earth and its splashdown in the Pacific. Just 7 minutes away now from crew module, service module separation. That European service module has worked like a champ throughout the course of the mission. The service module, which of course housed the solar arrays and all of the other propulsive functioning for Orion throughout the course of the mission, has been monitored in the European Service Module Control Room in Noordwijk in the Netherlands, where that team of flight controllers is eagerly awaiting the completion of the service module's work just a few minutes from now, when it will pyrotechnically separate from the crew module, leaving the crew module on its own. Entry interface is scheduled just 26 minutes from now. We'll be receiving reports from Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of flight controllers throughout Orion's descent back into the Earth's atmosphere and through all of the parachute deployment sequence events leading up to splashdown that is scheduled at 11:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Central Time, 9:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Pacific Time. One thing worth noting is once Orion splashes down in the Pacific, it will stabilize in one of two positions, either pointed up, which is called stable 1, or pointed down in stable 2. The crew module uprighting system, known as the CMUS, deploys a series of 5 bright orange helium-filled bags on the top of the capsule that will either flip Orion right side up or keep it right side up in its stable 1 position. Those 5 bags are packed in hard containers and installed atop the capsule inside the structural gussets between the parachutes and other equipment. They're inflated with helium gas that is stored in pressure vessels located close by the bags. Each bag has its own independent inflation system. The CMUS, or Crew Module Uprighting System, initiates after landing and opens up a valve for helium to flow into those uprighting bags. It is considered, at least operational, that we have 4 out of those 5 bags to inflate to maintain a stable 1 configuration for Orion to enable Navy divers to approach the vehicle. One of the first things that they'll be looking for is any leakage of toxic gas or toxic fuel from the vehicle. Assuming there is no such leak and that Orion appears to be in good shape, then they'll begin the methodical process of approaching the vehicle with other personnel and other Navy assets in order to begin the securing of Orion on the ocean for its towing back into the well deck of the USS Portland. We're under 4 minutes now until the crew module and service module separate from one another. We'll be standing by for all of that. You can see in this telemetry-driven animation that Orion is currently traveling just under 17,000 miles an hour, just under 4,000 miles away from Earth, and a hefty 250 in distant retrograde orbit, flying around the moon for its outbound powered flyby at the beginning of the mission to move to a distance of some 268,000 miles away from Earth, farther than any human-rated spacecraft designed to return to Earth had ever been designed to do, surpassing the distance record established 52 years ago during the Apollo 13 mission. Here in Mission Control, the flight dynamics folks and the guidance, navigation, and control folks have put up a graphic which is essentially the ground track for Orion as it will make its way across the southern Indian Ocean, passing the northwest coast of Australia en route to its ultimate trajectory that will carry it across the Pacific. It will be moving from south to north across the Pacific Ocean to the splashdown zone, almost a direct straight line towards the point of splashdown, which will be west of Baja, California. Just under 2 minutes until crew module, service module separation. Now just 1 minute away from crew module, service module. 30 seconds until separation. This will come at an altitude of 3,200 statute miles. 10 seconds until set. We have confirmation of separation. Orion flying on its own. Again, the separation occurred right on time at 11 a.m. and 11 seconds Central Time, with Orion 3,200 statute miles away from Earth. The service module, the European service module, has done its job. So with Orion flying on its own, we're about 18.5 minutes away now from the point of entry interface, where Orion will be put through its paces. This is where the heat shield will begin to feel the effects of peak heating of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the heat shield, and the beginning of 2 blackout periods where the plasma around the vehicle will build up such that it will block data and communications between mission control and the spacecraft itself. Orion continues to fly smoothly on, all of its systems in excellent shape. Less than 17 minutes until entry interface. And the crew module raise burn that we thought was not going to be needed is being conducted. Just basically a fine-tuning of the orientation and the angle, a 16-second firing of the thrusters, and a good burn reported, 8.12 feet per second, and a change in velocity. So the raise burn was executed. That will further fine-tune Orion's path at the proper azimuth or orientation, where the heat shield is at its optimum angle, to begin the repulsion of the heat that will build up around the heat shield at the time that we begin entry interface, just about 15.5 minutes from now. So the crew module service module separation went off as planned. The raise maneuver was executed at 11:03 and 41 seconds Central Time. Again, the raise maneuver was executed. Orion now flying at the proper orientation for entry interface into the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface is scheduled at 11:20 and 14 seconds a.m. Central Time at an altitude of 400,000 feet. At that point, Orion will be traveling 24,464 miles an hour with a range to splashdown of 3,659 statute miles. Flight controllers reporting a solid lock with the tracking and data relay satellite system, receiving data that's being processed through the TDRS network. Just a reminder that after we pass into the Earth's atmosphere, at the speed at which we're going, and with the temperatures expected to build up very quickly for peak heating around the heat shield of Orion, we will begin the first of two blackout periods, the first of which is scheduled to begin at 11:20 and 16 seconds a.m. Central Time and will last about 4 minutes and 48 seconds. At that time, entry guidance, which has been stored on board, pre-programmed commanding for Orion to continue to point its way toward the splashdown zone, will take over. The first blackout period should end around 11:25 and 4 seconds Central Time. That will set the stage for the skip entry, basically the maneuver that will enable Orion to dip into the Earth's atmosphere and skip back out of the Earth's atmosphere and dip back into the Earth's atmosphere like a rock, a flat rock on a pond. That will continue to dissipate energy and heat on the spacecraft, and is a maneuver that data will be gathered for to try to bring in multiple splashdown sites for crewed missions in the future. The second of the two blackout periods is scheduled to begin at 11:29 and 3 seconds a.m. Central Time, and that will last for about 2 minutes and 50 seconds till about 11:31 and change. That'll be the final blackout period, after which we should lock up solidly for the remaining 8 minutes or so until splashdown.